Let's get into it. 2023 NBA draft is mostly in the books as we speak to you right now. It's 11:18 p.m. Central, 12:18 a.m. Eastern. They're wrapping up the second round, but most of the important stuff is done. Norlander spent the night analyzing picks on CBS Sports HQ. I hope you watch. I was watching from home. As expected, Victor Wembanyama went number 1 to San Antonio. Brandon Miller went second to Charlotte. Scoot Henderson went third to Portland. The Thompson twins went 4th and 5th and made history. No big surprise with any of that, although there was wild speculation about who would actually go number 2 throughout the day, Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson. The betting markets were all over the place. Either way, the top 5, again, no big surprises there, but there was a pretty significant surprise in the first round, and that's where I want to start. With Cam Whitmore from Villanova, one and done, freak athlete, slipping all the way to 20th. At one point, he was a projected top 5 pick. He went 20th. So let's start there, Deadleg. What happened to Cam Whitmore's promising draft stock?
Wow. Okay. I mean, listen, I don't have this with 100% certainty, but I think I broke Anthony Black to the Magic before anyone else, and you don't want to start there. But well, okay, whatever. I wanted one. I got one.
As long as you pretend Shams doesn't exist.
Yes, did I get it before? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
How about this? On my timeline, because I have a list that has basketball people in it, and it has Shams, and it has you, and it has Woj, and it has basketball people. Just lots of basketball people. For what it's worth, on my list, he showed up seconds before you.
That's what it is.
You were close.
I was on the set, and I was like, "Oh, am I going to get this one?" Oh, it's what it is. But anyway, no. Okay, let's talk Whitmore here because I did cover this. Oh, we had Andy Mitz in the chat says my timeline had Norlander before Shams. Okay, there we go. I'll take it. It's all in good fun, all in good jest. Okay, so I wrote a column for CBS Sports on Wednesday that was just kind of like NBA scuttlebutt, little this, little that. Now, one of the sections of that column was Cam Whitmore. Is the smoke that he's falling? Is it real or is it smoke? And I spoke with a number of NBA people, executives and scouts about this. And to a person, all of them believe that it was actually real, that he was going to fall. But they believe that a fall constituted Whitmore being in the 4, 5, 6 range to being in the 7, 8, 9 range. I did have one person tell me they thought potentially falling to 10 with Dallas either trading in that spot or not. It turns out it's double that. Now, the crazy thing about this is that Houston, which at one point was considered in play to draft Whitmore, winds up getting him at 20. As I said on HQ on Thursday night, we rarely see this at the NBA draft level. Now, in the NFL, we just had a situation where Will Levis out of Kentucky, there was, buzz that he might go second or third. He has to wait another day because the day 2 of the draft, the second round, happens a day later. So you get that every so often. Aaron Rodgers drops. We usually don't see a guy that is in that range drop that much. Yes, a drop by 3 spots, 5 spots, even occasionally a Michael Porter Jr. drops, 6 or 7 spots. I was there that night. I interviewed Michael Porter Jr. and he handled it well. And now look at him. He's an NBA champion. So why did it happen? What was the reasons behind this? Well, about a little less than a week ago, I started to make a few calls and texts, just trying to keep up here and there, knowing that I was going to write the piece that I wrote on Wednesday. And the noise around Whitmore was growing over speculation he would be taken high because although he had a good pro day, basically since his pro day more than a month ago, the story went that he just did not have a good string of workouts. He occasionally didn't interview well. The workouts were inconsistent, and it had become something that was obviously spreading. On top of all of that, I was told there was real concerns with his medical. Now, do I think those are the reasons that he dropped to 20? I actually think that some teams probably saw him there at 14, 15, 16, and maybe they abided by their big board and they did great. I would not be surprised if there was a team or two that in their room when they're making that decision, they're like, well, are we going to be the team that drafts this guy now? And it reached a point where Houston, first of all, like it had to be done. But all of that on top of, I'm not going to say him coming out of Villanova, he didn't have good things being said about him. He absolutely did. But, and to repeat myself from one more thing I provided analysis-wise, and Finkelstein backed me up on this on the show tonight, the Cam Whitmore scouting report coming out of Villanova did not line up and match with all of the other Villanova players that came out, in recent years under Jay Wright. Now, Whitmore's a different kind of player. He was the Big East Player of the Year, scored, the third most points for a freshman at Villanova in the past 30 seasons. So he had a good season, but a confluence of factors led to what I believe was the biggest storyline outside of the top 5 in the draft on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, reputable NBA reporters throughout the draft, as he was slipping, did vaguely mention that there's a problem in the medicals that's just scaring people off. I've seen nobody be specific with it, but it seems to be tied with sure, poor workouts can hurt you, but poor workouts don't turn you into the 20th pick when some people had you going 5th. That's not what
100%. Yes.
That's not what poor workouts do. There has got to be, typically when you see something like this, it is tied to medicals. I will say that in the past 2 weeks, because you got this string of reports where he had this amazing workout in California, blew all 30 franchises there, and he just absolutely
his pro day. Yeah.
He just killed it. And subsequent to that, I had heard some not so great things. I'll be just as vague as everybody else is about everything else about the interview process. He just wasn't great in the interviews. And there were some more things that were said that were pretty direct and frankly disrespectful. I won't repeat them, but the criticisms were harsh. And they had really nothing to do with basketball, but the criticisms were harsh. So I thought, okay, maybe this guy's not going to go 5. He'll go 10 instead. But it never occurred to me that 20 was in play. And I'm with you. At some point, you pull the trigger on it and you're like, you know what, we'll figure it out. But you can't pass on this type of talent with the 20th pick. Remember what Denver did with Michael Porter Jr.? That was a medical thing, back problems. And at some point they just said, I can't remember where Michael got picked. It was somewhere in the teens. If I
want to say 13.
Yeah, it was somewhere in that range. Yeah. And basically the explanation was, hey, we are picking between an immensely talented young man who might have some medical issues and some guys who we're not even sure going to make it or not. So let's just take the talent and hope for the best. And I think broadly speaking, you look back on that and you say, hey, Denver did well by drafting Michael Porter Jr. Yes, he has been injured, but he has also helped them win a championship. So that worked out well. And I think with Cam, you've got to do the same thing at some point, particularly when you're a Houston franchise that's got a bunch of picks, got a bunch of pieces. You're still rebuilding anyway. You can afford to take the swing. But that, to me, was the storyline of the first round. This guy who very recently some thought could maybe even get picked in front of a Thompson twin, slips all the way to 20. And if you watched him, I know you were on set all night. I had you guys on one screen. I had the ESPN broadcast on another screen. It gets real uncomfortable. When you wake up thinking that you really might be a top 5 pick, and that's the other thing about sitting at those tables in that green room is you start to look around and the tables are empty. The bar is clearing out and you're the only one there and it's last call, buddy. And that can get, I'm always empathetic towards young people in that situation because just like Victor Wembanyama said, and I thought, my God, any interview with him is blowing me away. He's just fantastic, But he started crying after he was selected, even though he knew he was going to be selected number 1. He's arguably the only guy the whole night who knew exactly where he was going, other than Chris Livingston, who apparently
has he been drafted, by the way?
At the time we had started, he had not been picked. But did you see the report from Shams? It was like at some point, Rich Paul started calling teams with picks and saying, "Don't draft him because we got a spot for him." I'm like, can you do that? I mean, sure, you can make the phone call.
That's not how this works. I'm pretty sure.
But
unless you're Eli Manning or John Elway.
Yeah, like, do you really just respect Rick Paul's second round wishes? Like, hey, we were okay, Rich. We were gonna take Chris Livingston at 39, but if you say so, we'll just let him slide by. Just a weird thing, but I guess nothing's weird when it comes to the NBA draft and clutch and all of that. Yeah. Anyway, Victor was probably the only person outside of maybe Brandon Miller who knew exactly where in Scoot, I guess, who knew exactly where he was going. And yet even he got emotional at when it happened. And the reason is because you dream about this night your entire life. If you're a basketball player, like, I'm going to walk on that stage and I'm going to shake the commissioner's hand. And my point is, Cam Whitmore's been dreaming about that his entire life, I'm assuming, at least large portions of his life. And he woke up one morning. If it wasn't this morning, maybe by this morning he knew this could get uncomfortable. But he woke up recently one morning thinking he was a top 5 pick. And to then have to sit there and watch all these other people clear out the room, just really, really tough. I was relieved for him when he finally got selected. I'll be rooting for him to do well in Houston. You bring up the Will Levis thing, and then I'll shut up. The point is accurate in the sense that there's a guy who thought he might go really high, and buddy, he had to even cut, he sat there all night. The television show went off. He still didn't get picked. He had to wait till the next day. Yeah. The difference, I think, between the NFL draft and the NBA draft is that the NFL draft is very rarely, and you're a football fan more than I am at that level, but it's rarely, or at least not as normal, for you to just take best prospect available. Like in the NFL draft, if you're not, there might be 24 franchises that will not even consider taking a quarterback in the first round because they already got a quarterback and they're not spending a first round pick on that. They need a defensive back or an offensive lineman or whatever. So when you're Will Levis, because I remember watching the draft that night, you kind of know on some level, like, if I don't go here, or here, I'm screwed, because these next 7 ain't looking. They're not even looking at me. They don't care. And if I don't go here, it's over. I'm in the second round. So there's only, when you're a quarterback, there's only so many places that will even consider taking you in the first round. And if they don't, then you're going to end up in the second round, which is exactly what happened. When you're a basketball player, every franchise has a moment in the first round where they'll just say, the talent's too good. We can't pass on this guy. And that's what makes it different with Cam Whitmore. 19 different times tonight, a franchise that I promise you 2 months ago thought, oh boy, if we could get him, woo, we take him. And they just passed, and he ends up going 20th. It was an interesting thing, and I imagine we'll find out in the coming hours, days, that exactly what this was. But I'd be shocked if it's anything other than some medical issue. Because even just to touch on this point, bad workouts aren't going to cost you this much. Even like, he's got he smokes weed a little bit, and I'm not suggesting that about Cam Whitmore, but I'm saying even that is not going to drop you this, like, from 5 to 20. It's got to be where franchises have looked at something and said that it's either a problem now or it will be a problem at some point. And dead leg is frozen. I think you're frozen, dead leg.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you still have my Wi-Fi, yeah. My Wi-Fi is a little sketchy right now, so I think you still have me here. I'll hop in real quick on this, and then we can take the break and go to the next segment. Hopefully, I'll come back after the break. Cam Whitmore was the only player whose slide not only was significant, but came at a level of great surprise. The only other 2 players, in my opinion, who slid and the momentum was heading that way, heading into draft night, were Bryce Sensabaugh, who at one point was considered, a practical choice to go in the top 20. He also had concerns with his medical. He had a knee issue at the end of the season. So that caused him to drop down, but he did go in the first round. And then Andre Jackson Jr., who I do think will be a top 20 player in this draft. I think he is even though the shot is, it's not there, and I don't know if it's ever going to be there, but I think he will be productive for a long time. It wasn't a surprise to see him go into the second round, but for a little bit there, he had some good first round buzz. He wound up slipping, but those two guys got drastically overshadowed by what happened with Cam Whitmore, who weirdly enough takes the long way home and winds up going to a franchise who, if you said 2 weeks ago that Houston was going to walk away from this draft with Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, those could be they could wind up being the two most athletic players out of this entire class. Now, we'll see. Houston's got a weird roster construction. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. That's a whole other different deal altogether. But that was a very compelling storyline at draft night. And so here we are. Let's wrap up. Let's take a tour around the rest of what went down there on Thursday, JP.
Well, I would just say, because it sort of fits under this umbrella of guys who were, 5-star prospects who really slipped in this draft. I don't think Amani Bates slipped as much as we knew. He was a second-round pick at best and might not even get picked at all. He did ultimately get picked, but this is a guy who at one point was considered the number one player in the world in his age group, and he went 49th in the 2023 NBA draft. And Gigi Jackson, who was at one point the number one prospect in the class of 2023. So if nobody ever reclassifies, is Amani Bates and Gigi Jackson maybe the number one and number two prospects in their class, and they go 49th and 45th in this actual draft, which I don't guess is too far off from where they thought they would go a week ago. But it is way off from where I bet they thought they would go 2 years ago, maybe even as recently as a year and a half ago. And with Amani, that goes without saying. We don't need to spend any time on that. This is what was expected for him, given the way his time at Memphis went and his time at Eastern Michigan went and the off-the-court issues. When the season was over, Gigi Jackson was widely regarded as a first-round prospect, maybe in the teens, possibly in the 20s, but a first-round prospect. And he ends up going 45th, and we don't have to get too much into it, but I don't know what you heard, but when I was asking people about prospects who might slip because of, bad interviews, bad workouts, just bad vetting process, a name I heard consistently was Gigi Jackson. And I don't like saying that because I don't know if you saw who drafted him, but it is the Memphis Grizzlies. But I had heard not the reviews were not great on him. I didn't know that. I thought he'd slip to 45, but I was pretty confident he would slip it in the second round. And that's a pretty dramatic fall for a guy who thought he was probably going in the 20s at worst when he formally entered the 2023 NBA draft.
Agreed. Well, let's take a tour around the guys that went outside the lottery, GP, and see who we like most and maybe not.